welcome Nora, and welcome to all of you. I am Angela Hamblen Kelly, and just so thrilled that you all are here. We know that grief is universal. Jason said that. It is the most universal experience there is. It is also one that people tend to run away from. We know that this auditorium should be filled with a line out to the parking lot because grief is universal. All of us experience grief. And Nora had the opportunity to come out and tour the Kimmons-Wilson Family Center for Good Grief today, and we so appreciated that and so appreciate your respect for the work that we're doing through all three of our grief centers. And
it's really more jealousy. I was like, we don't have this. I didn't have this.
Right.
My kids didn't have this, but I'm glad you do.
Yes, we are very thankful to many people in this room. One thing that we say a lot at the Center for Good Grief is that grief is big, grief is real, but grief is better shared. And that's a tagline we use all the time. And that is really what sticks out to me through your work is the same three pillars. You know, grief is so big, it is so real, but it is so much better shared. And that's what you have done through your work, and that's why we're thrilled to have you here and to have the conversation tonight. So I also want to acknowledge that grief is big and it's hard and it's universal, and some of what we're going to talk about you're going to feel yourself, and this is a space that's okay. We're here together to have the conversations that people often shy away from. But thanks to Nora's work and work of others, people are talking. So can you start us off and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, Anne kind of ruined my intro. Truly, I had the most boringly perfect life for most of it. I would say that the hardest thing I went through before I was 28 was that in fourth grade, my parents got me a bowl cut, and I went to a WWF wrestling match, met Hulk Hogan, big highlight, and he thought I was my brother. And that was the biggest tragedy I had experienced until, should I take that? I'm joking. Honestly, my phone will ring. It will be one of my children complaining about something that really their dad should be taking care of right now. But I'm like the emergency call, as if I've ever said yes to anything. Anyways, my life was perfect, and I fell in love with the perfect guy. Things were so wonderful. The kind of guy where on your second date, you're like, how many kids do you want to have? And that's usually a red flag, but he was like 2, and I said 4, and he said 3, final answer. And that seemed great, and we had a whole year where we got to enjoy each other and also plan for the future. And then one day out of nowhere, he had a seizure at work, and his coworkers called me and said, does Aaron have seizures? And I thought, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard. Of course he doesn't. And I met him at the ER, and because both of our lives had been so charmed, we had no idea why the doctors were making such a big deal out of it, and why he had to stay, and why he had to stay overnight. And it turned out that he had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor was really bad. It was a stage 4 glioblastoma, and I only Googled it once. And I didn't need to ever look up anything else about it again. Once you know what it is, you know pretty much everything you need to know about it. And Aaron and I got married a month after that brain surgery, and we had a baby, and we had a really, really wonderful marriage with a side of cancer. It wasn't even like the main event in our life together. We just had such a good 3 years. And he died after my dad, which was, very unplanned. My dad got cancer very suddenly. I assumed he was just jealous of the attention Aaron was getting. And afterwards, I'd never really seen grief at all. My grandparents had died when they were very old, and we all cried at the funeral, but they were ready, and it was beautiful. It was a celebration of life. It was not a tragedy. Those are very different things. And I didn't know what it looked like. I assumed that it was supposed to be crying. I also assumed, because Western culture is not good at grief, that it should end at the funeral. I was given 5 business days after Aaron died before I had to get back to work, and that's a generous policy.
That's very generous.
It's very generous. The average is 3. And so I really didn't know what to do. And the question that I was asked most often after Aaron died was, how are you? And I always said, I'm fine. I'm really, really good, because it seemed easier to say that than to invite people into the confusion, the bigness of grief, which is not wrapped up in 5 business days, and which is really messy. It turns out it's not just crying. It's extremely inconvenient, tangly emotion that happens at unideal times. Target.
Yes.
You know, why am I crying over yogurt? I can't tell you why. I just know that that's what I'm doing. And if the checkout person asked me how I am, that was the only person I was honest with, by the way, was like a 16-year-old checkout person at Target who, like, I don't even go to that Target anymore, because now, like, I went back, you know, recently, and he was like, oh, geez, please don't come to my line. And I'm going to answer your question, by the way.
You're perfect.
We're going to get there. My train of thought is more like a person on a jet ski. Not even a person, any mammal. A mammal who should not be driving, but got on a jet ski. It's a small body of water, so we will circle back. But you're going to need to stay put with me for a moment. So Erin was dead. I was a very good liar. It turns out, like, basically an Academy Award-winning actress, and everybody believed that I was fine, and everybody left me alone. My siblings, my mom, my cousins, who are like my siblings, my friends, everyone believed that I was as fine as I said I was. And I got a lot of attention when Erin died. Minneapolis is a big city, but not really. And it was literal headline news when my husband died. He and I had written his obituary together, and the first line is, per mort, Erin Joseph, age 35, very standard, died due to complications of a radioactive spider bite. And it revealed his identity as Spider-Man, and I did not know that they would publish it. But Erin and I had written it together, and I thought, what the heck? Well, they did publish it, and it went viral, and I started getting emails and Facebook messages and letters. I did not realize my address was published online. I started getting so many messages from people from around the world who were telling me about something that they had gone through. And while I was sort of wrapped around my own grief and my own suffering, convinced that nobody would ever understand it, it was not even worth trying to be honest about because no one would ever get it, I was seeing that really the thing that I was so sure set me apart from the world was the thing that made me a part of the world. Right. And that there were all these people who felt the same way. And these were not friendless, familyless weirdos, not all of them, at least, statistically speaking. There were probably a few, but they were people whose friends and family had asked how they were, who had heard the word fine, and believed them. So I had started writing my first book